Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro. 1, 2, 3.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. Glad you could join us on a Thursday. Don't worry, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be covering this story. Did you hear about this? Apparently, Kim Jong-un was hitting on Sarah Sanders, and Donald Trump told her to take one for the team. We'll talk about that coming up here in just a little bit. But, you know, I've been talking about on this show a lot, if Donald Trump is going to win, he needs to reach out to middle America, right? If Joe Biden is going to win, he's going to have to get some Republicans to get to the other side. And we saw a few of them in the Democratic National Convention. Well, John Farner is one of them, right? He is an organizing committee member of the 43 Alumni for Biden organization. He's a former official with the U.S. Department of Commerce with the George W. Bush administration. So certainly an interesting conversation we're going to have with him as John Farner joins us right now on the line. John, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Hey, what's up, John?
Hey, great. Thanks a lot for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Of course.
So do you agree with that sentiment that I just said, that Joe Biden's going to have to reach across the aisle and get some Republicans to vote for him if he's going to win this thing, and then vice versa? Donald Trump's going to have to get some independents and get more people to support him now than they did in 2016. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think it's incorrect at all. I think that Joe Biden has done a great job of towing the party line while positioning himself as someone that moderate Republicans and those who supported Donald Trump questioning how he'd be as a president, giving them permission to vote for Joe Biden. I think he did a great job, but I think, Brian, that's absolutely right. We're going to have to get some Republicans over to Joe Biden's camp in order for him to secure a sound victory this November.
So let me ask you this. As someone who worked with the George W. Bush administration, my understanding is the Bush family, not big fans of Donald Trump, right? George W. Bush and nobody in his family, from even Jeb, have come out and said that they support Donald Trump. But let me ask you this. Why is it that they're not coming out and supporting Joe Biden?
President Bush, we all have sound respect for him. We all spent 8 years working for him under his strong leadership. He said he's retired from politics, and we respect that decision. He has not said one word, one way or another, about this presidential race that may or may not speak volumes. His silence, for whatever reason that may be. But we respect his decision to stay silent this election.
And listen, I understand that. I really do, John, and I get it. But with that being said, he understands. Come on, he's the former president.
Well, I think it speaks volumes that at the Trump convention that just ended, there wasn't one former GOP presidential nominee or a sitting former president who spoke during that convention.
That is a fantastic point, and I am certainly not going to argue that at all. As you know, Trump had a lot of his family members speaking. What do you think it means to the Bidens and to the family and to those who support Joe Biden when you got a guy like Kasich who comes out and speaks, and you have other Republicans as well? There weren't a lot of Democrats that certainly spoke for Donald Trump in the RNC. What do you think that means, John, to Joe Biden and his family, that you have some Republicans that have come across the aisle that say, Colin Powell, I think, is another perfect example, that have gone across the aisle and said, I support Joe Biden?
We're seeing every day more and more former Republican officials, governors, GOP party officials, former Republican members of Congress, all coming out and supporting Joe Biden. And what I think that means is that Joe Biden is running a campaign of unifying this nation rather than dividing it. President Trump, he's having issues bringing his own party together, and let alone the American public. And what we really need, and I think it speaks volumes to what you just said, Brian, and having folks like Bernie Sanders speak at the convention, as well as John Kasich, shows that he's willing to have everyone around the table to have policy discussions based on merit. And that's really what we need right now. We need the adults back in the room.
Agree. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with John Farner. He was with the U.S. Department of Commerce with the George W. Bush administration. To stick on the topic of George W. Bush, John, let's talk about the John Lewis funeral. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I did not vote for George W. Bush, but the moment after 9/11 where George W. Bush picked up that megaphone and said, "We hear you, the world hears you," I got goosebumps. It was a great moment for the country. Listen, I'm not a fan of the war in Iraq. I'm not a fan of a lot of the decisions that George W. Bush made. But I think the Bush family is a classy family. I've always said that about them. So let's talk about the John Lewis funeral. George W. Bush, he not only goes to the funeral with his family, but he gets up there and makes some remarks. Him and John Lewis, they never really got along very well, right? It was John Lewis that didn't even go to George W. Bush's inauguration. But George W. Bush stood up there, and I thought it was a great moment for the country, really, to have a former president do that. And I appreciate the fact that George W. Bush did that. What do you make of that and the fact that Donald Trump not only didn't even go to the funeral, used the excuse, well, John Lewis didn't go to my inauguration. What do you, the two differences there, it's just mind-boggling to me, John. What do you make of that?
I think that what we need is leadership in America. And being a leader means more than just worrying about how you are personally viewed to a certain constituencies throughout the United States. And we've had strong leaders at many points in our history, whether it's Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan,
right,
Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, even Barack Obama. These guys have had some instances where they have had viewpoints from differing perspectives come together under a unifying message, regardless of what you felt about other policies they brought to the table.
Right.
They had they had respect towards the other side of the issue. They understood and debate. And I'll take your example one step further, Brian. In the days after September 11th, not only did he stand on top of the ruins and pick up a megaphone and speak to the American public off the cuff, that was unplanned, but he also went to a mosque and said that this is a war against terrorists. This is not a war against Islam or the Islamic faith. And that's very important for a president to come out and do that it's not always night and day. There is a middle ground. And what we're seeing now through the division of America, it is you're with us or against us. There are protests and there's not protests. And that is not the case. We need to be able to have empathy towards the other side, listen to them, and make sound decisions based on merit and what's best for the American public.
Sure. And I want to go. I want to ask you why you're supporting Biden, and I want to ask you why you turned Republican to Democrat. But before I do that, I have to ask you one more question about George W. Bush. Now, listen, since you worked in his administration, listen, I'm not one of those people that would ever say that 9/11 was an inside job. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think it's absurd. And as you Jesse Ventura's of the world that make statements like that, I think they're very irresponsible. However, I am one of those people, John, that does believe that perhaps the Bush administration used 9/11 as a calling card to go to war in Iraq and go after Saddam Hussein. As we know, there were no weapons of mass destruction. I'm willing to believe that it was faulty intelligence. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But I certainly believe what took place on 9/11 was added fuel to going to war in Iraq. Is that fair for me to have that opinion?
Brian, I respect whatever opinions you have. I mean, I don't consider you a good or a bad person based on a differing perspective we may have on the war in Iraq or the war on terror that occurred in the early to mid 2000s. Historians continue to debate all of this, and they continue to debate via talk radio and TV and just their family and friends. And historians are going to look back and decide, you know what, that was the right or wrong course of action. And even the president himself welcomes that discussion on a regular basis. If you question anything, decisions that were made, he welcomes that with open arms, that kind of discussion.
Which is a nice distinction compared to the president we have now, and I think that is a good quality.
And that's where leadership comes into play. We need to begin unifying our nation.
I agree. I agree 110%. I certainly listen, I respect his opinion for not coming forward and getting involved in politics, but I just disagree with it. I think, based on just what the Trump family has said about the Bush family, the personal attacks, I think it would speak volumes if Bush came forward and said, I am going to support Joe Biden as president. I don't think he's going to do that. I respect his reasons. I just think it would be a wonderful moment for the country if he did do that. Okay, so let's move on now, John. I want to get your story here. You're a former Republican. You worked in the George W. Bush administration. Why have you decided to go across the aisle and turn Republican to Democrat? Why? Tell us why.
Let me preface my statement saying I still consider myself a Republican. I have not left the party. The party has left me, and I'm not alone. After this election, in what will hopefully be a non-contested election results with a Biden landslide, we can all hope for that outcome. We will begin to pick up the pieces of the remnants of the Republican Party, which has really turned into a cult of personality behind Donald Trump. So with that said, I don't consider myself a Democrat. I'm a Republican, similar to others that have come out in support of Joe Biden, who respect Joe Biden's record, who respect what he's done as a senator, who respect what he's done as vice president, and really feel that even after the Democrats released their platform, we're still waiting for the Republicans to release their platform, that this is something where it's a good base to start policy discussions, knowing that he's going to bring people around the table. So with that in mind, we, as John Kasich said, we're at a crossroads, and we're all Americans right now. Party affiliations, we're putting aside for the time being and just supporting Joe Biden to get America back on track.
Okay, so, and I appreciate what you said. So my co-host is a staunch Donald Trump supporter, and we get into debates, arguments every single day. And but
good.
Yeah, it's certainly
we have a lot of battles, John.
Yeah, we have a lot of
aggressive battles.
We have a lot of battles. Sometimes it gets heated, but you know what? I'm an independent, and because I trash Donald Trump every day because I think he deserves it, people want to label me a liberal. When I did not vote for Hillary Clinton, I didn't vote for Barack Obama. But anybody, who cares about that? JD, I want you to talk to John, and I want you to tell him why you're voting for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. Explain your reasons, and then I want John to respond to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that Donald Trump is a significantly more qualified business person than Joe Biden is, obviously. I think that Joe Biden is simply too old to be the president of the United States. I believe that. I mean, it really bothers me that Kamala Harris she was the most liberal senator for 3 years running. She was the least likely senator to vote bipartisan in a bill. What's going on with the fact that he hasn't denounced Antifa at any point, to me, is a major issue. The fact that it took him nearly 4 months to denounce violence at all, the fact that it wasn't mentioned at the DNC is an issue to me as well. I mean, there's a lot. I think that his mental acuity is not where it needs to be. I watched 2 days ago there was an interview that he did, I believe, in Pennsylvania, where he went on. You can call it a gaffe. I don't know what it was, but he basically completely butchered 2 or 3 sentences. And I think that Joe Biden is not, I wouldn't say he's being controlled by the dark shadows. That's probably a stretch, but I don't think that he's making his own decisions. And I am very fearful that if Donald Trump loses the 2020 election, that we could be looking at a socialist and or a Marxist or communist America, or at least the beginnings of one, especially with politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, the squad, if you will. So that's pretty much a couple of reasons as to why I prefer Donald Trump over Joe Biden. I also like the fact that he's not a career politician. I like the fact that he's not for sale. He doesn't need any money. He came into the presidency. He'll be probably the first president. Let's say that he loses in November. He'll be the first president to leave the office with less money than he had when he came in. I mean, he hasn't really. I mean, you look at the majority of politicians, both Democrat and Republican establishment politicians. The majority of them get significantly wealthy. They get very wealthy while in office. That's not the case with Donald Trump. He doesn't need any type of deal with a company to put any money in his pocket. He's not for sale, and I like the fact that he is very, very blunt and straightforward in his approach. Obviously, he's not like Barack Obama. He approaches it differently, but those are a couple of the reasons, John.
Yeah, and listen, all of those taken into a vacuum, I don't disagree with any of those. I do not go as far as saying that Joe Biden is going to bring a communist or a Marxist state to the United States, because if you flip that coin on the exact opposite side, one could argue that we're slipping into a fascist government with the current president, which is just as, if not more, dangerous. So that's of concern as well. When it comes to a businessman, I think after years of having family dynasties and seeing corrupt politicians come through, and people wanted a change. I mean, this was brewing from the 1970s on up with how people viewed the politicians in Washington, D.C., et cetera. So I can totally see how that message of wanting a business person, someone who is not, quote unquote, for sale, they want that person into the presidency. Now, a lot of those people, I feel, those reasons are why people voted for Donald Trump in 2016.
Which I agree with.
He was very blunt. He was a straight shooter, off the cuff. He was popular from his television show. He has that personality that people look up to and say, you know what? This guy has a personality. I can follow him. He's charismatic, and he's a good businessman. He has his name on the side of a helicopter. The guy has to be successful, right? However, we only know what he tells us in that aspect. We have not seen his tax returns. He's the one that cried and cried and cried for a birth certificate from Barack Obama. Let's not debate those merits, but we still haven't seen his tax return. So whether he needs the money or not, I'm not really sure of that. The counter argument I'm going to make to all of those things you just laid out, JD, is the following. Number one, I don't think we're going to slip into a communist state. We are going to have policy discussions. Period. End of story. So that's one. Number two, we really need a president who. Oh, I'm sorry. We need someone to follow the rule of law, and it's the rule of law based on statute and the Constitution. Not pick and choose which rules and laws to follow based on what is popular via the populace or politics at a certain time, what's good for the individual. For example, the Trump convention, the GOP convention on the White House lawn, that not only flew in the face of norms, there were illegal activities that occurred, specifically relating to the sitting chief of DHS regarding the naturalization ceremony held at the White House with the RNC logo in the corner. That is a clear and distinct violation of the Hatch Act by the acting Department of Homeland Security chief with Donald Trump right there. He didn't care about that law. Didn't care about it. So we need someone who actually understands the laws and will follow the laws. If you disagree with the laws, you work with Congress to change them. Not only enforce the ones you want to and then decide, hey, I'm the president, I can do whatever I want in the other. Mm-hmm. But your comments on wanting a business person and someone that is outside of politics, I get. We need to reset. We need somebody else in there. And Joe Biden is that guy. We need somebody else in there to level us off, pull us together, and not be so divisive. And have respect for one another.
John, do you think that I've seen what's happened with Antifa and BLM and just the arson and the violence and the looting and the rioting? These people, they want an entirely new economic system. They say, you've seen several Democratic mayors that have had BLM on their homes. Doesn't matter. They've been in support of Black Lives Matter, but they still get vandalized. People still try to burn their places down. To me, what I'm seeing here, whether it's Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi, whoever it is, I think that I think that if someone hates America, there's nothing you can say to bring them together outside of just kneeling to their demands. And their demands are socialism, communism, Marxism.
That's not true.
Again, that's just my opinion, Brian.
So I think what needs to be, what you're seeing are symptoms and not the disease. Okay, all of the demonstrations, the quote unquote riots or quote unquote demonstrations, quote unquote riots, all of the protests that are occurring out there are symptomatic of an underlying cause.
Right, exactly.
And what we need are people to talk about the cause of why this is happening. All we're talking about is the symptoms.
Right.
We're now talking about whether, right or wrong, we have police officers that are shooting someone in the back 6 times. Is that more right or wrong than a teenager crossing state lines with a rifle and shooting 2 people?
But how does that have anything to do with Donald Trump, though? I don't see how Donald Trump is any way associated with the Kenosha Police Department.
The leader of our nation, needs to stop using words like there are good people on both sides. He needs to denounce the protests and the violence that's occurring while understanding why people are upset.
John, exactly with what you were just talking about, John. I just want to make a quick example. John, you know what took place in Portland over the weekend, right? He actually retweets and supports the Trump caravan. We know some of those people were violent. He supports them, and then on the other side of things, every opportunity he gets, he wants to call all these BLM protesters violent. So, John, the point I try to make, and I think that's the point that you're trying to make as well, you need to attack both sides of the aisle for doing things that are wrong, right? Is that what you're saying, John?
Well, words matter.
Right.
The choice of words, what you choose to say, words matter.
Now, what about... Sorry. Now, what about Joe Biden, who we consider to be this beautiful unifier? He in response yesterday to what happened, he basically said that from what I was told, there were people shooting paintball guns and they were inciting violence, and the death of this man was a response to that. He basically justified that death. He didn't. That's what I mean. How is that unifying the country? How is justifying the death of one person in a 600 or 700 person Trump caravan going down Portland by saying that, well, somebody in that group may have shot paintball guns in response to actually having urine sprayed at their car? How is that unifying the country or making an effort to unify the country?
Like I said, words matter. And
right.
If I'm not familiar with that quote, Judy, I sincerely apologize.
No problem, John, at all. No problem.
Quote from Joe Biden, and if he did say that, I'd look at the context in which he did say it. I'm aware of paintball and being shot in the crowds and people crossing state lines with rifles, which is a federal crime. So, I think that you take all these actions as a whole. Okay, so everything that Donald Trump, whether it's calling people to commit voter fraud in North Carolina or not denouncing someone crossing state lines with a rifle and murdering 2 people,
right?
Okay, which is a federal law. That's under his jurisdiction, federal law. Okay,
right.
So you take that as a whole, and then Joe Biden as a whole, and then we decide which one of these do I want my kids, my sons and my daughter, which one do I want my kids to listen to and
exactly. That's my point.
As they get older.
John, I'll even take it a step further. Here's something Joe Biden did say the other day. He said he denounces violence on both sides. He denounced the protesters, and he denounces it on both sides of the aisle, something Donald Trump has yet to do. But, John, I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on and your experience. And, hey, if you can get us George W. Bush to come on for about I tell you what,
Katie did a better shot at that than I do. I don't know. We'll see.
Hey, whether it's Laura Bush or George W. Bush, it would certainly be an honor to get them on for a few minutes. But John, I really truly appreciate your perspective and the work you did in the Bush administration, and thank you so much for your time for coming on, John. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for your insight, John.
Thank you so much.
And I miss my days of traveling to Vegas during quarantine. I look forward to getting
back.
Hopefully that'll change soon.
Play some craps, man. Come on out here.
I know. Well, my Washington Red Wolves, I got to put some action on them sometime soon.
Okay. The Red Wolves. Boy, it's so weird saying that. Yeah.
Is that the team? They're not the football team anymore?
The Washington Red Wolves.
No, they're the football team. We'll see what happens.
Well, you know what? When the Red Wolves come down and play the Raiders, look us up, my friend. I appreciate it.
Watch out for Chase Young. Chase Young's got a chance to have a huge year.
John, I appreciate you coming on, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John.
All right, guys. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Again, that is John Farner. Very interesting discussion with him. And listen, I had plenty of – he worked in the George W. Bush administration, and I had plenty of criticisms of the George W. Bush administration. Look, a lot of people said George W. Bush, privileged guy, right? We know who his father was, the former president. Immediately, general manager and then running a professional baseball team. Then, all of a sudden – years pass and boom, he's the president of the United States. I've interviewed Jeb Bush before. There's a lot of people that I've talked to in regards to the Bush administration that are not exactly what I would say huge fans of the Bush administration. But one thing I will say is that Donald Trump has made George W. Bush look like a lot better of a president. There's no question about that. No question at all. The war in Iraq was a complete debacle and it was a joke. And thousands of our own soldiers died. Hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqis died. And for what? Because we found Saddam Hussein inside a hole with a pellet gun and a candy bar. That was a disgrace.